Story 1. A girl I met in college told everyone a different backstory about her life. One day, I was hanging out with a group of people, and her name came up. Turns out she told each of us something different. Where she was from, who she was dating, her upbringing, and so on. Her stories ranged from having to sell cows to attend college to being raised in a rough neighborhood. She ended up getting kicked out of nursing school. Why? For lying about serious situations during clinicals. Story 2. My mom tried to pretend that she died. She made a social media page pretending to be a random man and posted about how she had a funeral and none of her children showed up. Nobody in our family believed her, but some people were really sad. A few weeks later, she came out and said that her friends stole her phone and made the social media page. Story 3. In the United States-based medieval reenactment group, we occasionally had European immigrants. In one case, a new Irish man joined. He was charming and showed potential, so he was accepted into the group. However, two intoxicated men followed him around, waiting for his fake Irish accent to slip. Despite people pretending to be medieval Europeans in costume, nobody put on a fake accent continuously, especially not outside reenactment events. But these two party enthusiasts were convinced he was faking a Pippin accent from The Lord of the Rings. I found them obnoxious. Here was a real Irish man, well connected to his family in Ireland, and these two drunk Americans were teasing him and calling him a faker. Fast forward a few months, the Irish man met a woman in the organization. They became serious, and they were expecting a baby. Suddenly, it emerged that those two intoxicated men were right from the start. He was entirely an American who faked an Irish accent, was caught in a lie, doubled down, and built his entire life around this fabricated personal history. Those two men really were good judges of character. Story 4. There was a man who made a complaint about my security team during the COVID-19 pandemic. He said we were too mean to him and submitted a formal complaint. A month later, he applied for the job and got it. He told us all that it was his twin brother, not him. Nobody talked to him for a few weeks. Then one day, he said out loud, "My twin brother just died the other day of cancer." Everybody was shocked and thought he was very strange. Story 5. I had an old roommate whose cat had kittens shortly after I moved out. I was gifted a kitten from that roommate. A few days later, they informed me that they had set up an appointment to get all the kittens vaccinated, spayed, or neutered. I told them I would handle that for my kitten, but they insisted the appointment was already made and they would take care of it. On the day of the appointment, he picked up my kitten and then disappeared with it for 9 hours. He returned my kitten with no vaccination records and still with a pair of testicles, insisting that the kitten had been neutered and vaccinated. Story 6. A man I was in a serious relationship with told many lies. Took me a while to figure it out. When I did, I had a debrief with his sister who had more stories. He dated a woman before me and told her he was a professor on sabbatical from England. He maintained an English accent throughout their 6-month relationship. She only realized the truth when she met his sister, who did not have an accent. He is from Wisconsin. He also convinced his sister that he needed an organ transplant. When he met me, the story was that he was doing coastal research in the Yucatan with a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Later, he said he had brain cancer but recovered. Story 7. My sister claimed to have had 11 abortions, had an abortion of a 7-month fetus, and the doctor made her strangle it herself when it cried. Given birth to twins in secret and sold them when she was 13. Given birth and raised a child for 4 months until it was kidnapped. Was completely sterile. Had human immunodeficiency virus. Had chronic Lyme disease. Had lupus. Had epilepsy. Had never had acne. Had a sexual relationship with the band Weezer. Had a hysterectomy in secret at 19. Murdered a woman who hit on her boyfriend and buried her in a landfill by hot wiring one of the machines. Was sexually abused by my father, both grandfathers, almost stepfather, 3 neighbors, 2 of my mother's friends' husbands, almost every boy in our friend group growing up, all of my exes, my husband, her husband's father, my brother-in-law, and her teacher. Had an intelligence quotient of 170. Knew who my father's biological father was and had met his 10 siblings. That my father was inbred. Only had 2 beers a day. Made an appointment with the neurologist. Had Guillain-Barré syndrome from the COVID-19 vaccine, not Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. Had passed brown urine and black stool her whole life. Story 8. My ex's best friend lied about being a special operations military person. He went so far as to buy a uniform, weapons, war memorabilia, and more. He even claimed to have a Purple Heart and made up a whole story about the sacrifices and horrors he faced to receive it. I have no idea how he got the Purple Heart. Maybe a family member gave it to him. Do people sell those as antiques or something similar? Anyway, it was very creepy and uncomfortable. This guy was literally 18 or 19 years old, just a rich kid trying to feel cool and special, I guess. Story 9. My personal favorite was someone who was going to Jones College. She scored 1,500 on the Scholastic Assessment Test, and members of the rock band Led Zeppelin were practicing on her block. This was Jacksonville, Florida, in 1989. Story 10. An old coworker of mine made it to 40 after 3 heart attacks for different cancers, 2 dead mothers, a deadbeat father, a Wall Street father, a single father, and a single mother. God knows what else. He got fired for doing something that cost our company $2.5 million and lying about it, even though he was on camera. Story 11. I had been told by someone who was a story topper type, always needing to have a bigger story regardless of the subject. One day, the topic of fishing came up, and he bragged about catching a 20-pound bass from a nearby lake. I didn't think much of it. Later, someone else told me how ridiculous that was, explaining that fewer than 10 bass of that size have ever been recorded in history, and half of those are contested, fabricated, or manipulated by methods such as adding weights into the fish's stomach before weighing. Story 12. I knew a man who was active in the military. He used to tell us some of his so-called sea stories. One story that particularly stuck with me was about a weekend trip when he somehow ended up in the desert in Saudi Arabia fighting a penguin. Despite this, he was able to return and report for duty on Monday morning. He was stationed in the United States at the time. We tried to call him out on it, but he insisted it was true. Story 13. It's not usually crazy, off-the-wall lies that they tell. It's the day-to-day stuff that just keeps piling up over time that blows my mind. Stuff that makes you say, why would anyone lie about that? Story 14. I worked with a woman who would alternate between being pregnant and having suffered a miscarriage every few days. Challenging times. Story 15. I once witnessed a group conversation about feeding babies. They were discussing breast milk versus formula. One person mentioned that they knew someone whose mother fed them goat milk as a baby. Immediately, another person said, I was raised on mouse milk, completely straight-faced, as though nobody would even think to question it. Story 16. Melvin and I were talking in an office. I asked Melvin what time it was. The clock was on the wall behind me. He told me it was 1:30. From the look on his face, I turned and looked for myself. It was exactly 1 o'clock. The man could not tell the truth if his life depended on it. Story 17. Someone I used to know was recently exposed for faking stage 4 brain cancer. She had her entire family convinced, including her parents. She faked doctor visits, lab results, and more. She posted videos in tears about how she was dying and trying to qualify for clinical trials as her last chance. I became suspicious when she talked about how difficult it was to be balding while still having a full head of hair. She had a fundraising campaign with about $20,000 in donations. Suddenly, her fiancé called off the engagement, which was very shocking and unexpected. A few days later, she was hospitalized for unrelated issues, and her parents discovered she never had cancer to begin with. Story 18. I am a veteran, not from the United States, and had a coworker trying to tell me big war stories, but I could immediately tell he was not truthful. He claimed that he killed 100 Taliban fighters by himself. Story 19. There was a girl I went to high school with who always craved attention. Her grandmother died 4 times during our junior year. Story 20. I had a strange experience in a grocery store around 2009, and I told a few people about it. In 2022, one of those same people told me the exact same story, but said it happened to them. Story 21. When I was 21, I moved to the Midwest to pursue a lucrative internship. When I got back to the East Coast and reconnected with my friends in college, my then best friend Aiden had apparently had the most active, exciting, thrilling summer ever. He got into a fight with the leader of a biker gang outside a bar and earned their respect. He developed a severe drinking problem and got treatment so that by the time I returned, he was sober. Then there was the girl he met, beautiful, intelligent, devastatingly witty. They met in the hospital after the fight and fell wildly in love. He was going to ask her to marry him. Unfortunately, she was there for a cancer diagnosis. She passed away a few months later, after asking him to leave a white rose on her grave every year on her birthday. 7 months, people. I even know some of the places he stole these storylines from. That white rose on the grave thing is from the movie Highlander, which we both saw. The whirlwind drinking problem is a staple of prohibition fiction like High and Outside and The Late Great Me, something he almost certainly would have seen in a drug abuse resistance education program. There are no biker bars within 50 miles. I think I returned to college with a pocket full of money, several bylines, and a bunch of stories of life in the big city, and the fear of missing out was just too much. Story 22. I knew a girl in high school who lied about being pregnant. A couple of weeks later, she lost the baby after her boyfriend pushed her down the stairs. I knew from the start that she was a pathological liar, but she fooled many of my friends. I always warned them about her. She became obsessed with me because I didn't like her, didn't talk to her, and tried to warn others about her. She has tried to add me on Facebook at least 15 times over the last 15 years, and I always decline. She even tried to add my husband, who she didn't know. I have noticed that such people tend to obsess over those who do not believe them. Their need for validation and approval is extreme. Story 23. My bipolar ex said she had my child last year. Luckily, I already knew what kind of liar she was, so I wasn't going to believe it until I had hard evidence. The timeline didn't add up unless she had the child 3 months early, and there was no evidence she was pregnant the last time I saw her. Additionally, the child's name changed several times, and none of her family confirmed she was ever pregnant. It was all just a ruse to get me back into her life. I'm not sure how far she planned to take it. What was she going to do? Borrow a friend's baby and present him to me as mine? Story 24. My mom lies about what she would have for lunch. She lies about the dumbest things that do not even matter. I call her out on it and get gaslight. So very weird. Story 25. I know one guy who would say things like, "My uncle is a very intelligent man who teaches at a prestigious university, which means I am also a genius." He lied every time he spoke, even though everyone knew he was lying. Story 26. He told many unbelievable stories, but this one stands out. As a child, he won tickets from a grocery store to take a cruise following the path of the Titanic. When they reached the spot where it sank, they were raising it from the ocean floor for everyone to see for the second time. He remembered his own birth. He was deaf until the age of 13, so he has no regional dialect. He and his ex did not work out because in the 1700s they had a falling out in a shipyard in Ireland, and he left on a boat. His nonsense was so extensive that a song was written about him called Drivel Driver. Story 27. I knew a guy who insisted he was rapping on a song he played. He just wouldn't admit he lied. He kept saying over and over, "No, man, that's me." Completely serious. It was a Wu-Tang Clan song, and the voice he claimed was his belonged to Method Man. Like, dude, it's not even believable. Method Man is in the group. Story 28. A man I dated claimed he had testicular cancer twice. He had no scars, no surgery, no chemotherapy or radiotherapy, and 2 testicles. After we broke up, I spoke with his previous girlfriend, who told me she dropped him off for treatment, but never went into a hospital or doctor's office with him. He had no surgery, medical letters, or any other treatment. I believed him at the time, but after we separated, I was diagnosed with cancer and realized there was no way he had had it. This was one of many lies I discovered. He also had a vasectomy without telling his ex-girlfriend, who wanted children, and boasted about her not knowing. I think he did it for attention or sympathy. Whenever I asked about it, he would say he didn't want to talk about it, which I understood, but I could never understand how it had just gone away. Story 29. He said he went to a Detroit nightclub where the Russian mafia recruited him to sell drugs. He is very silly and could not fight at all. Story 30. My sister was pulled over after she received a driving under the influence charge. I was a passenger. I had previously asked her if her license had been revoked, and she told me no. I asked her again as the police officer approached the car, and she said, "No, my license is not revoked." The police officer came to the car and said through the rolled-down window, "Ma'am, you were driving on a revoked license." I don't really talk to her anymore because of this situation and many others. Story 31. He shot a 12-point doe. He wrote a major piece of state legislation but could not remember any details. He was abducted by extraterrestrials but was smarter than them, so they released him. Story 32. I dated a man who claimed to be a disabled veteran. He would tell stories about his time overseas and in combat, saying his missions were so classified that the Department of Veterans Affairs could not provide him with a therapist. He said he was discharged for post-traumatic stress disorder. One day, while cleaning out the closet, I looked at his DD Form 214. He was not discharged for post-traumatic stress disorder. He was discharged for bunions. A lot of the information was blacked out on the form, but judging from ink stains on the back, it had definitely been altered to look redacted. Eventually, he had me add his service friend on my Facebook so he could catch up since he did not have a Facebook account at the time. Later, I found out from his friend that my boyfriend never left his duty station in Hawaii. Months after we broke up, I started treatment again for schizoaffective disorder. About a week later, he began having hallucinations of people he claimed died in combat, even though he was never in combat. I was finally able to move out a few months after that. The stolen valor situation made me sick to my stomach. Many members of my family are currently serving or have served. It felt like a huge disrespect to those who gave their all in combat zones. Story 33. My sister-in-law lies about everything, including her own marriage and divorce. They were never legally married. She abandoned her child for a career opportunity. She has lied about almost everything in the 9 years I have known her. We went no contact after she behaved strangely a few years ago. Life has been drama-free since. Story 34. My friend's wife, I am female and my best friend is male, so for whatever reason, the wife always tells me many fascinating stories about her life. Once told me her mother was one of the original women to help establish Planned Parenthood, and how proud she was and how it shaped her life. I accepted this. We are older, so it could have happened. This belief stood for several years. Then, randomly, she told me her mother, about 93 years old, was going to go out west and then up to Alaska on a cruise, which seemed unusual but fine considering all her friends are deceased and her remaining child was standing in front of me. Then she added that Boeing was flying her out to see their new manufacturing plant because her mother had been an important aeronautical engineer there for a long time, and afterward, they would get her onto the cruise. I did not ask further. I figured that whatever condition caused this story would lead to trouble if contradicted, or her mother is the most interesting woman ever. Story 35. She fell asleep on the sidewalk during a snowstorm to explain why she did not call me after school. The guitarist of our favorite band flirted with her at McDonald's. They were in our town that day, and we were 13 at the time. She claimed to be best friends with my crush and said she was passing along my messages to him. She was not. She was reading them herself and laughing about it. She said she went to camp with him that summer and saw he had gotten a girlfriend and lost his virginity that summer. She also claimed she broke her leg at camp. He did not do any of that, and her leg would not have healed fast enough for it to be true. I was really close with two of his best friends. I told them what she said about summer camp, and they told him. He came to ask me about it in person in front of her to confront her. She stopped being friends with me after realizing the truth, and neither of us wanted her mediating anymore. She was a fun friend and had a new best friend every year after that. Every time, they would return from summer complaining about her being a liar and no longer wanting to stay friends. Story 36. I had a friend like this in middle school. Among his lies, his grandmother promised to buy him a box of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards for every duel he lost against me. This was like $100 back then. One of my best cards went missing, and mysteriously one showed up in his deck the next day. It was Black Luster Soldier Envoy of the beginning, for anyone curious. That emergency phone number allowed him to call anytime he wanted just to chat. He then proceeded to attempt to demonstrate but hung up, resulting in the police showing up. At the same time, I was awarded Student of the Month in our grade for volunteering to tutor the special education class. He claimed to have also been awarded Student of the Year. Story 37. Oh, I have a good one. He said he was part of a secret military experiment where his DNA was bonded with mountain lion DNA or something. Story 38. At a job I had in my 20s, there was a new employee who was a scrawny 18-year-old. Within 5 minutes of meeting him, he claimed he was a fullback for the Pepperdine University football team, which disbanded in 1961, and that he had a black belt in karate, among other lies. After his first day of work, I never saw him again. Story 39. My mom could not retell a story without embellishing it. Each time she told the story, it became wilder. Occasionally, she would try to tell me a wild tale. I would listen carefully, and at the end, I would say, "Mom, you forgot that I was there when it happened." She would go quiet for a while before starting again. Story 40. There is a man in my country who keeps claiming that the 2020 election was stolen. He also denies raping a woman, despite a group of jurors stating otherwise. Additionally, he frequently talks about being a genius. It becomes tiresome after some time. Story 41. My husband's aunt was diagnosed with cancer. She had surgery and underwent treatment. Technically, all of that was true. However, she told everyone she was terminal. My husband's grandmother, who is the aunt's mother, believed her and organized a large benefit. They raised a lot of money, but that evening, as they were counting it, the aunt complained that it wasn't much. She was also upset during the prize auction because winners did not donate their items to her. She spent all the money on a new car and a vacation. We live in a small town where word travels fast. She burned nearly every bridge she had after that. The cancer went into remission and never returned. That was over 20 years ago. She is now in very poor health and is facing serious financial problems. She has set up several crowdfunding campaigns for herself but has only raised about $50 total. No one is supporting her this time. Story 42. I made a new friend at work. One day, we met up at a diner and then decided to drive back to her house. I had never been there before. I was following her in my car. She started speeding through yellow lights and I lost her. She did not answer my calls. I took that as a sign she did not actually want to be friends, even though she had asked me over. The next day at work, she told me she was speeding through lights to get to the hospital because she had thrown up blood and found out she has leukemia. I knew she was lying immediately but kept my suspicions to myself. All our coworkers were concerned at first, but then things started to not add up. 2 weeks into chemotherapy, she said she stopped treatment because her body was not responding well. About a month later, she said her body fought the cancer on its own and she was in remission. Absolutely absurd. The real kicker is that the night she threw up blood, I had confided in her about my mom passing away from cancer 6 months prior. Honestly, a disgusting human being. After that, we all started talking and figured out many more lies she told. Story 43. I went to high school with one of the worst pathological liars I ever met. What made it strange was that he actually had a pretty interesting life if he told the truth. The craziest lie he ever told me was not exactly a lie. It was a story about something someone else had done. The person who had done it was me. He tried to pass my own story off to me as his. Story 44. I used to work in security and had a supervisor who was a really bad liar. He always made up stories about people he saw walking around in suspects. One day, one of the office employees' mothers died, and this supervisor told that employee he had ordered a huge bouquet of flowers to be delivered to her funeral. It was all a lie, and the employee cried and was hurt. I don't know why someone would make up such a lie. Story 45. We had a friend in high school who was a pathological liar. The lies weren't big, but he was somewhat unintelligent, so they were pretty obvious. One night, We were all out to dinner and decided to take turns telling the most unbelievable stories we could think of while making strong eye contact with him. At first, he tried to play along, but by the fourth person, he realized what we were doing, and you could see it on his face. He actually stopped lying for about a month. Then he went right back to it. In retrospect, that was cruel. All we had to say was, "We know you're lying, so please stop." But hindsight is 20/20ths, and wisdom is learned. Story 46. I worked at a radio station where one of the advertising salespeople told me she was going to sing backup vocals on the new Eagles album. Or maybe it was Chicago. They were going to record it somewhere in Connecticut, but she was not allowed to say where. Story 47. She spent an entire year of high school in juvenile detention for beating up another girl, but somehow got into Princeton University, yet could not afford it. Story 48. I worked with a woman who apparently faked having cancer to the point where she shaved her head and took significant time off work. It was a very unusual situation. Story 49. They catfished me. I was in an internet relay chat room, not looking for relationships or anything romantic. My conversations were mostly about recipes. This guy fixated on me and started talking to me. Gradually, we spent more time together. He seemed like the entire package. Thoughtful, funny, intelligent, had a stable, well-paying job and a house. Eventually, he wanted to meet me in person. There were some red flags here and there, but he had excuses, so I pushed my gut feeling aside. He flew out to meet me and didn't look anything like his photos. This was about 15 years ago, so video chatting wasn't common then, at least for me. I asked for his identification, and his name matched up. I started questioning my sanity and called a mutual acquaintance to ask who the person in front of me was. It turned out the guy had asked the mutual acquaintance to lie to me. I sat him down and told him he looked nothing like his photos and that he had lied. The photos he sent me were of an attractive person. This guy was very much the opposite. He then told me he had a confession. I had already lost my patience and asked him what it was. He proceeded to say he killed someone in another country. I just rolled my eyes. After I got home, I did some research and found out he never worked for the company he claimed. I also found his real address and he didn't own the house. He was unemployed and living with his parents. I cut ties, but for a while he kept trying to stalk me online. He called mutual acquaintances to check my social media because he wanted to keep tabs on me, even going so far as to call people at 5 a.m. for information. They all told him to stop. I'm not sure where he is or what he is up to now, but he told many lies, even about the smallest things, like claiming he had a girlfriend before meeting me, complete with a made-up social media account, claiming he had been in a coma, and that he had a sister, among many others. I am sure he has targeted other people since. I don't wish him well. Story 50. He told me that he and his wife had a new baby. I said, "I thought you got a vasectomy?" He got nervous and said, "I had it reversed." I didn't believe him. It turns out he married a pregnant woman and claimed the child as his own. Story 51. After I graduated high school, I ran into an old classmate, not a friend, at the gym. He was telling me how he plays football at the University of Southern California, which was a lie. Then he also told me that the New England Patriots minor league team was scouting him for the draft. Story 52. This man tried to say that wood could melt and that he had seen it happen. The next day, he denied it, but everyone remembered. Story 53. I am involved in a legal matter with an unstable aspiring celebrity who was born in one city, moved to another, then moved to our city as a teenager, but tells everyone in the news he was born and raised here as part of his local brand. He runs a business that opened in 2017, but tells the news it has been open since 2012. When he was 16 years old. He claims he opened it after running a coffee shop on his own for 3 years. He has given interviews where he claims to be older than he is. He thinks college is a waste of time and money, which is why he became an entrepreneur at age 14. Then he tells his audience that he attended a large university after high school and majored in business and marketing. In one article, he claims to have earned his Master of Business Administration degree before age 20. Public records show investigations into him, his business, and a fake charity scam he ran in 2020 to 2021. resulting in permanent cease and desist orders for his businesses and sales tax liens over $30,000, but he denies it ever happened. He tells journalists and the court that our team manipulated the public records. Public records obtained by a major newspaper in 2021 show he was involved in funneling over $10,000 away from our city's municipal animal shelter with his business partner, who was fired for his role. He tells people this never happened and claims the city donated that money to him. He opened a nonprofit animal shelter inside his t-shirt store in a fancy shopping complex, which was shut down within weeks by authorities due to lack of registration, zoning, and valid tax-exempt status. He went on a press tour to promote it, which led to his exposure. He told a judge in 2021 that he never opened or intended to open an animal shelter, did not own its website, did not advertise for one, and that any news appearances or articles calling it a shelter were typos the news refused to correct. He also told the judge he never appeared in the news. He claims to run a marketing firm that does not exist on paper and claims to have worked with international brands, the state lottery, and luxury designer brands as their marketing director, none of which are true. He has claimed to own and open several restaurants in town but does not own or work at any of them. He is hired as an influencer to appear at grand openings and post on social media, but his resume and website falsely state that various businesses hired him to consult on their business plans and design and build-outs. At one point, he claimed to be part of a well-known gang and that rappers Mozzie and E40 were his marketing clients. There is more, but this is sufficient. Story 54. I am an architect, and we work with many local tradesmen. One day, a man who does copper work, such as flashings and roofing, came to our office to collect a check. He began telling us an incredible story about how he owned a collection of 50 Corvettes, all secured in an underground garage. Then he pointed to a garage across the street from our office, a normal two-car garage, and said that was the access point, where an elevator takes you underground. After he left, I stood there completely confused about what had happened. I do not know if he was showing signs of dementia or not, but the story seemed detailed yet clearly false. I have known many pathological liars as acquaintances over the years. They usually lie about things that do not even matter. Others lie to improve their social standing, such as claiming to be from a prominent family. My ex was not a pathological liar, but because he was gay and closeted, he became accustomed to lying even after he came out. If we were invited to a party and he did not want to go, he would invent an elaborate story to avoid attending. I would say, just say we cannot make it. You do not have to justify it. Lying about small things is a bad habit. You inevitably get caught, and it is embarrassing. Story 55. They were beaten up by a gang and survived having their neck broken in 2 places and 4 gunshot wounds. They walked 5 miles to the nearest hospital. That is probably not even the most ridiculous one. It is just the first one I remembered. Story 56. Faking a seizure while performing on stage. The secondhand embarrassment was enough to make me want to dig a hole and die in it. Story 57. A man I worked with who made the same amount of money I did, which is less than $100,000, and had massive debt, told me he owned a lake house in Maine with a waterfront view. Later that day, his debit card was declined when he tried to buy a soda from the vending machine. Story 58. I was in a band that had just formed. We had 3 songs and had not played a show. A member of the band claimed he had gotten us a gig opening for the band train and a $100 million record deal. He said many things. Story 59. Pretending to be a millionaire with my girlfriend and went house shopping. The real estate agent still calls me to see if we are still in the market. Story 60. Oh man, I have a few, but my favorite is they have no fingerprints. They wore off from years of gardening. Story 61. My sister put makeup bruises on so she could tell people at school she was being abused at home. Why? No idea. But it led to Child Protective Services getting involved and ultimately found no wrongdoing. Afterwards, my mom sent her to live with our alcoholic father. From what I heard, it was not a pleasant few years for her. Story 62. A friend told me that she stayed home sick because she was running a fever of 125 degrees. I told her that if that were the case, she would be dead. She told me that I obviously did not understand how people of color bodies work and that it was racist to assume she was lying. Story 63. A girl I used to work with told us she was a student at the law school part of our university. She was a year younger than usual for law school, but I didn't give it much thought. She told me one day that school had been canceled because someone had committed suicide on campus. It was a long time ago, and I was about to go to class, so I called the university to check. They didn't know what I was talking about. She told me she lived with her uncle who was looking for a research assistant in my program. She offered to give him my resume. Then she said he wanted to interview me. She gave me his number. I called him, and a very confused woman answered the phone. Somehow she figured out what I was asking and asked, "Are you looking for my friend's name?" I still don't know if her uncle existed, but he certainly never called me. She told me she had cancer but was in remission. She said that the summer before she had lost all her hair and 4 teeth. She had pretty short hair, so I didn't question it. She told us that she was interning at a law office downtown that summer. Some of my friends were going to meet her for lunch. Turns out that office didn't exist. I should have caught on sooner, but I was pretty gullible and tended to believe the best about people. Story 64. My great-aunt texted me while I was in labor, emphatically informing me that I needed to reconcile with her daughter. Later, when she gave me more unsolicited advice, I reminded her of the first situation. She said that she never said it and that I was making things up. I sent her screenshots, but she still denied it. She told other people that it is all schemes of the devil making me say these things. Story 65. I have known 2 white women who race faked. They created elaborate lineages and recipes, learned languages, and used fake first and last names, only to be exposed through brief social media scrolling. A real if I had 2 nickels experience. Story 66. She lied about all her education, claiming to have been admitted to medical school, and now says she is a practicing physician. There is no record of her online anywhere, in any province or state in North America. Story 67. I didn't know this girl, but it is kind of funny in a messed up way. She and my ex-husband were hanging out after we were divorced. She called me one day and told me all this crazy stuff, like that she punched her niece and was a methamphetamine addict. She told me straight up that she is a pathological liar. A few days later, she messaged me asking if she should date my ex-husband. I said I did not think he was ready. He tried to rebound with a catfish that cost him probably over $5,000. Then hooked up with this woman despite multiple red flags. I also mentioned that she had told me she was a pathological liar and he did not need that in his life. She told me she never said that. I said yes, she did while we were on the phone. Her response, in her words, was, "I must have been lying then. Thanks for proving my point." As a bonus, I warned my ex-husband about her, but he ignored me at the time. I tried to say hi a couple of years later, and he said I had told outrageous lies about his girlfriend and told me to go away. Sorry for trying to protect you, dude. Story 68. Let us see. There was the one time she lied about being pregnant and having an abortion. There were multiple mystery men who were dating her. There was one time she said she might have cancer. She was 16 at the time and never went to doctors. But the most extreme incident was when she showed up to school an hour late, telling everyone she was kidnapped by masked men in front of her house. She said they threw her into a windowless van, drove her around, and then dropped her off at school. Story 69. Not necessarily crazy, but my dad would punish me with them when I was a kid. For example, we had just moved from Chicago to rural southern Indiana. I was going into 5th grade. At one point, my dad told me that my best friend from Chicago had run away and worried about it for over a week. After a week had passed, he asked me how it felt to be lied to and said that she had never run away. He also grounded me from the phone so that I could not call her. Story 70. My brother constantly lied. It was not so much that the lies themselves were unbelievable, but that he tried to get away with them. Like the time he left an empty pizza box and a pair of stained underwear under my bed and swore repeatedly that he had not been in my room until I threw them at his head. Or the time I watched him smoke a cigarette, toss it on the ground and step on it, and he denied that he had been smoking, even though I was about 20 feet away and he did not know I was there. Once he came home around 2 in the morning, crying with bullet holes in the back of the car and no rear windshield, and said nothing happened. Absolutely pathological. Story 71. Talked to a friend of a friend who said he worked for Tesla, so I kept the conversation going. He is also a well-known rapper. In reality, he lives with his family and works at a motel cleaning rooms. I hope that he is doing okay and has the medication he needs. Story 72. A minor, who was a friend of the family, showed up long after they were due, causing alarm. The excuse was that they had been stopped by the police, handcuffed, taken to the precinct, fingerprinted, and then released. Both the police car and precinct smelled of smoke, which explained why her clothing was offensive. All lies were exposed when she realized she had no ink evidence on her fingertips, which was pointed out by those of us who saw through it. Story 73. He flew to China and set up the entire stock exchange. Then he snuck into North Korea, did some sightseeing, and met with someone from the special forces. It was so crazy that I just nodded my head while planning my exit from the conversation. Story 74. The last straw with my pathological liar college friend was when she told me our other friend's long-term boyfriend had kissed her. Many of her lies were about attention from guys, and I just wrote them off as fantasies. But this one put me in a bind. Either it happened or she made it up, and either way, I felt obligated to tell the other friend. She, the liar friend, never spoke to me again. To this day, not a single word. But honestly, that's fine because who does that? Story 75. He told us that his uncle was an astronaut on the space shuttle. We all knew his family since we were kids, and we just laughed. He stormed off in a rage about it. That is just one of millions of lies. The interesting thing is the longer you knew him, the more you could figure out the truth through his lies. He led a pretty sad life, to be honest. I felt sorry for him and tried to be a positive part of his life until the end. Story 76. A woman I used to work with said in one conversation that she, 1. was a professional hockey skating coach for the Minnesota Wild but quit due to sexual harassment. Was a student at the University of California, Berkeley, studying psychology but dropped out because of sexual harassment from a professor. The university then paid her hush money. Was the youngest pilot to be recruited by the Navy at age 14 but decided she wanted to do more with her life. She was a receptionist and also had a pretty wild criminal history. She looked like Mrs. Potato Head if she had a septum ring and poor quality Japanese tattoos. Story 77. That her father touched her. He is a sex offender now. That she was pregnant because another person was pregnant, even downloading an ultrasound picture off the internet. That she tore ligaments in her foot and needed surgery. Then I found a paper stating her foot was fine, that the cannabis dispensary named a bud plant after her. Just stupid lies. I do not believe a single word she says ever. Story 78. Doe. I already answered but then remembered that I hung out with the person who sued Motley Crue, claiming that he secretly filled in for an injured Nikki Sixx on tour. We spent hours together at a cookout, and he had some remarkable stories. I wondered if he even knew how to play music, so I invited him to come over and jam the next day. I was staying with my mother for a week. He said he would bring a guitar and a bass so we could jam and write. The next day, he showed up with only a keyboard because his lawyer advised him not to write with someone from out of town, fearing I might take all of his ideas and disappear. He decided we should only drink and sing along to my band's demo. Silly weekend. Even though he was deceptive, I didn't feel threatened or think he was a bad person. Probably helped that I was on vacation. Story 79. My mom's friend is married to a scam artist. He is out of town a lot, and every time the reason he is not back in time is different. The last time, he said he was robbed by ninjas in full garb, shot his evil brother, and was trying to get an inheritance buried under his family's chateau in France. He says he imports and exports luxury cars. Story 80. I know a man who claimed to be a billionaire on his social media profiles. He also said he was a fundraiser for an anti-human trafficking organization. He became upset when someone publicly asked why a billionaire passionate about stopping human trafficking was not funding the entire organization himself. Eventually, he realized that no one believed the billionaire story and removed it from his social media. He will deny it if asked. Story 81. I rather loved my college ex telling me that he was accepted to Princeton as a transfer student. When I pointed out he had a 2.3 grade point average, he doubled down by saying the admissions office would rather see you struggling with hard classes than getting A's in easy classes. Then I made the mistake of saying you are a communications major. I wasn't aware the communications curriculum included classes in astrophysics and engineering. And that is how the fight began. Story 82. Have you ever been with a narcissist? The lies are unbelievable. Every word that comes out of their mouth is unpredictable. Story 83. My wife and I found a house we wanted to rent, but it was massive. We invited a friend to rent the upstairs. He told our mutual friends that he owned the house and was going to evict us. Another story that is not crazy, but funny. A few years before the friend moved in, my wife and I got married on Oahu. I surf, but none of my close friends have ever learned. He came to the wedding, and I couldn't pay him to come surf with me. Fast forward a few years later, and his significant other made a passing comment about how he will never catch waves as big as the ones from our wedding trip. I couldn't help but laugh, and he just got up and left the room. I didn't even call him out, but my reaction combined with him leaving made her understand. Story 84. I caught them with their hand in my handbag, holding my purse. When I asked, "What are you doing?" I was met with gaslighting and denial about having their hand there. I had to shout, "I am literally looking at you with your hand in my bag right now." They still kept lying. Story 85. I remember watching September 11th happen when I was a sophomore in high school. One of my friend's boyfriends, who was about 3 years younger than me, tried to tell me that he was a firefighter and volunteered to help with the World Trade Center towers. He would have been around 11 or 12 years old. To this day, he still tells people that. Story 86. A guy I went to paramedic school with told us he was an Army Ranger, a Green Beret, and a Navy SEAL. He was 31 years old, plump, and so out of shape he couldn't climb stairs without sweating. Then he said he had the highest grade average in our class, which we knew was a lie, because I actually followed the grades closely and was followed by 2 women. I asked him once when he was going to tell us he was actually 6 feet tall. He was 5 feet 7 inches. Story 87. Either fake pregnancy, fake cancer twice, or that they were a sergeant in the military, all from the same person who told many other disturbing, blatant lies. Story 88. When they send a text, you ask them about it, and they try to tell you it was a typo once it does not go the way they planned. How is that a typo? Story 89. Buddy's wife claimed she could get into medical school because of special high school classes she took. She said her dad was an engineer, but also claimed she taught him how to read when she was a child. There are many more unbelievable stories. She also decided she was a born-again Christian vampire and convinced her daughters that they were vampires too. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.